The purpose of the Flick-Reedy Education Enterprises is to promote individual moral responsibility through education. How do we do this? We study and discuss the interrelationships of history, philosophy, social studies, and economics. We do not dictate. We do not make statements as to what we think you should or should not do. We do not unduly burden this program with footnotes, references, or complete documentation. However, we do give sufficient data to bring this discussion into proper focus. We invite you to delve further into the necessary historical and statistical data to develop a deeper understanding of truth and a keener sense of individual moral responsibility.
Earlier, we presented the position of socialists who say that they are not communists, and we listed the ways in which they claim to differ with communists. So, while conceding that not all socialists are communists, it is true, however, that all communists are socialists. Some quotations from a variety of informed persons set forth their views. Senator Carl Mundt of South Dakota said,
"Of course, socialism and communism are related. They are ideological blood brothers. If anyone does not believe that, ask any communist." Khrushchev uses the words interchangeably.
Former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Harold Macmillan, hinted that the final result is the same when he stated,
"There is no difference between socialism and communism, except that socialism is soft, communism is hard. Socialism is pink, communism is red. Socialism gets you down bit by a kind of anesthetic process. It might be called a mercy killing. Communism just knocks you on the head."
William Z. Foster, formerly head of the Communist Party, USA.
It is especially hard in this land of comparatively high living standards to make the workers understand the flimsiness of American prosperity, the advantages of having communist leadership in their daily struggles, and to convince them of the need for the eventual establishment of socialism.
Gus Hall, then secretary, now leader of the Communist Party, USA, wrote in the Daily Worker,
"The future, despite evident dangers, looks brighter than ever as the second year of the 1960s is ending. We have every confidence that the glorious era of communism will come in our lifetime. This confidence is immensely strengthened by the success of the economic and cultural plans of the socialist people."
Why should the point be made that there is a connection between socialism and communism? The reason is that while almost everyone is opposed to atheistic communism, quite a few people accept significant parts of socialism. When we learn that all of the leaders of communism believe that socialism is the stepping stone to communism, whether the socialists like it or want it, it gives us cause for concern. For the social and economic central planning of both socialism and communism requires the use of force or threat of force by the central planners. And when they have the authority and inclination to use force, it means that a great many people are going to lose their liberty, their freedom of choice. Let's look at several specific areas where central planning has taken away freedom of choice from the individual citizen. Before we start, be assured that partisan politics is not involved. Both major political parties and their administrations have proposed and supported these laws. Do you have total freedom to decide on how you shall provide for your years of retirement and old age? If you are one of the vast majority of citizens from whom taxes for Social Security are extracted, you have lost part of your freedom of choice. Oh yes, you may do anything in addition to this that you want, if you have the money left with which to do it. But on the basic Social Security and Medicare program, you have no choice. you must pay the tax. You have lost part of your freedom. Such social legislation is based on the presumption that many, if not most people, are unable or unwilling to provide for the years of their retirement or old age and periods of medical disability. Therefore, in the interest of humanity, the central planners, using the threat of force, and force if necessary, extract tax money from all of us, usually from our employer without our ever getting our hands on it, to carry out their central planning ideas. From talking with many different people, I'm convinced that they feel the people of the United States could no longer manage without Social Security. To consider stopping Social Security is a thought so horrible and cruel that it defies imagination. They immediately think of the thousands of elderly people that might go hungry and want for the necessities of life. This example simply bears out the point made earlier in studying socialism in Great Britain. Once socialism has been established as part of a country's lifeblood, it is extremely difficult to root it out. In another area within our own country, the farmer does not have complete freedom of choice to decide what and how much he shall plant and grow. The central planners of both major political parties have decided quite a few years back to, in effect, repeal the natural law of supply and demand. Therefore, a person or small group of persons have decided what and how much of certain farm products shall be planted and grown, and what price shall be paid at our expense as taxpayers. Even when, as in the referendum for the 1964 wheat program, farmers say with their vote on a specific issue, they do not want such central planning, their wishes are brushed aside by the planners, who go merrily on their way. I am sure they mean well, and that they think it is for the good of all farmers in the country as a whole. But in reality, it is raw power, replacing individual freedom of choice. If it is legal to do this to farmers, it can be done to anyone in any occupation. Consider for a moment that you're at home some evening. Your doorbell rings. You answer it. A man stands there and says to you,
"Sir, I have a 100-acre farm in which I am not going to grow wheat this year. For not growing 100 acres of wheat, I should receive $327.30. I'm going around the area and collecting from people. Your share of my $327.30 is $12.28. May I please have it?"
Imagine the thoughts that would go through your mind if you heard this. What would you do? If sufficiently aroused, you might slam the door in his face, or maybe tell him where to go. You might take it as a joke and string along with him until you found out he was serious. You might even do him the courtesy of explaining to him why you felt you had no obligation to pay him anything for not growing wheat. In any event, I am sure the moral concept of paying someone something for not growing something would cross your mind sooner or later. But in reality, this is exactly what we, as a nation, are doing with one slight difference. The central government has interposed itself between that man and you. I don't see how that changes the morality of the situation, but it certainly does change whether you're going to pay the money or not. If you don't pay the government, you'll wind up in jail. Or if you resist to the extreme, you will be killed. Please don't think we're particularly picking on farmers or recipients of Social Security. There are many other segments of our society in the same position. Big business and small business enjoy similar privileges by law, as does organized labor. Why have I included these specific examples of how central planning has taken away freedom of choice for the individual? I'm certainly aware that these issues are hot potatoes. It would have been more comfortable to have kept our discussion up in the clouds on pure theory and philosophy. But to protect and preserve our freedom, we're going to have to get out of the clouds. The reason I included these examples is that too often I hear people say with impatience and contempt to me or others like me,
"Oh, you people who keep talking about freedom all the time. Just exactly what freedoms have we lost here in the United States?"
It is to answer those people and those questions that I included some specific examples. For as I see it, freedom is not divisible. It's like saying that someone is a little dishonest, or tells the truth, most of the time. Either a person is honest and truthful, or he is not. I don't think you put shadings on basic principles. Isn't it reasonable to believe that the establishment of a system like socialism, which requires giving central planners the authority to use force where they consider it necessary, is the ideal situation for communism to step in and take over? I'm sincerely not trying to use a scare technique, but history shows that it has happened. That is what the communist leaders are talking about, and they are not even trying to hide it. I'm sure that almost every person and every ideological group in the United States has one thing in common. That is, to somehow find a way to help people in need, to give people in need the help necessary to put them on their own feet. The point at which people and groups begin to differ is how that can be best accomplished. In the preamble of our United States Constitution, it says that one of its purposes was to promote the general welfare. This thought is empowered by Article 1, Section 8 in the powers of the Congress, where it states,
to provide for the common defense and general welfare.
It is interesting to note that it did not say, provide general welfare, but provide for the general welfare. I suggest that there is an important difference. I suggest that the Constitution was intended to have the Congress enact such general laws which could provide a climate of living and earning a living that would enable every person to make the most of his or her God-given talents and opportunities. And, as the words general welfare imply, it would seem that any legislation derived from this thought should provide those conditions which promote the general welfare of all people, every place, and at the same time. For example, a uniform standard of weights and measures would provide the climate where people could voluntarily exchange goods and services using common measuring standards. Specifically, I would question whether providing for the general welfare was intended as a device for the redistribution of wealth to benefit some people at the expense of others, and to do it by means of force or the threat of force through the power of government. The French philosopher-writer Frédéric Bastiat, in his pamphlet, The Law, published in 1850, expressed these thoughts.
Sometimes the law defends plunder and participates in it. Thus, the beneficiaries are spared the shame, danger, and scruple which their acts would otherwise involve. Sometimes the law places the whole apparatus of judges, police, prisons, and gendarmes at the service of the plunderers, and treats the victim, when he defends himself, as a criminal. In short, there is a legal plunder. This legal plunder may be only an isolated stain among the legislative measures of the people. If so, it is best to wipe it out with a minimum of speeches and denunciations, and in spite of the uproar of the vested interests. But how is this legal plunder to be identified? Quite simple. See if the law takes from some persons what belongs to them, and gives it to other persons to whom it does not belong. See if the law benefits one citizen at the expense of another, by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime. Then, abolish this law without delay, for it is not only an evil itself, but also it is a fertile source for further evils, because it invites reprisals. If such a law, which may be an isolated case, is not abolished immediately, it will spread, multiply, and develop into a system.
Another aspect of governmental welfare programs which should give us considerable measure of concern is that such programs have all the power of governmental force to put them into effect. If you doubt that force is involved, you have only to obtain the record of those people who have resisted paying all or part of their taxes in protest of certain governmental programs. The government is obligated, apparently, to put into motion all the various procedures to implement its will. Whether as a Christian who believes in Jesus Christ as your Savior and Son of God, or as a Jew who considers Jesus as a great prophet, almost everyone considers that he was concerned with all mankind, that he commanded his followers to love thy God, and then to love thy neighbor as thyself, even to love your enemies. But nowhere in his teachings can I find that he recommends anyone using force to compel others to assist the needy, the poor, or the sick. He would have us use peaceful persuasion and the example of our own lives to persuade others. What reply do those persons and groups give when asked about the use of force in carrying out the various welfare programs designed to help those in want and need? Almost all of them, including many men of the cloth, reply,
Voluntary action just does not produce the amount of help that's needed. People just don't seem willing enough to give of their time and money. So force has to be used.
Here and there, the use of force or threat of force by the government may provide a disturbing prod to the consciences of welfare program advocates. But they consider force to be the lesser evil, since it's easier to tax people than to persuade people to give voluntarily. These advocates feel that the result justifies the use of compulsion and force. They adopt the position that the end justifies the means. This is the same position adopted by the communists. We began earlier with a quotation by the pioneer labor leader Samuel Gompers, showing his opinion about socialism. It is fitting that we close our study of socialism with another quotation by Mr. Gompers.
Doing for people what they can and ought to do for themselves is a dangerous experiment. In the last analysis, the welfare of the workers depends upon their own initiative. Whatever is done under the guise of philanthropy for social morality, which in any way lessens initiative, is the greatest crime that can be committed against the toilers. Let social busybodies and professional public morals experts in their fads reflect upon the perils they so rashly invite under the pretense of social welfare.